fire. I have with me today my man Harvey Graham. What's up, Harv?
Good to see you again.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. So I had the good fortune vis-a-vis Chris Krohn's foundation to spend some days with Harvey in the Ukraine. One of the things that I do is I consult companies, consult for equity. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm seeing this right now with a group that I'm really close with. This is not about war right now, but war has many different faces and disguises. And the company's about to turn profitable, right? There's owners, and the right hand isn't speaking to the left hand. And within this company ownership, I could see that as they break profitability and take that next step forward, the power of control is starting to develop. And it's showing itself in diluted, distorted manners. None of it's true, by the way. It's just how it's happening emotionally. You could just see it unfolding. Not to say that it's not like Ukraine or Iraq, but it's not like it's not either. Like there's still human dynamics, human behavior, and the desire for control, right? So for the business owners out there, the entrepreneur out there, understanding that, Harvey at the age of 18, 19, a lot of things went over his head. He had the foresight to see his corporals and some of the folks that were ranked higher go through an emotional toll because of their experience in life up until that point and thereafter, as well as seeing not only what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, but everything in life has patterns, right?
Yeah.
Right? And these patterns tend to repeat themselves over and over again. And the question is, if it's a suboptimal pattern, I'm speaking to the individual now, or the business owner, or the entrepreneur, how do you break that pattern? And if it's optimal, how do you double and triple down on that pattern? So that's the stuff that we look at here when we go to work. So anyway, wow, interesting. So Iraq led to what for you?
I went back to Afghanistan a couple more times.
Now, Afghanistan, well, stay with me on this because this is important. So Afghanistan had one face in 03, 04. Was it a different face at 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12?
Yeah.
And along the way, did you get married?
I didn't know. I held off. I didn't get married until I left the army.
So you waited for a long time to break into jail.
I waited. Yeah, I waited. I wanted to make the most out of my 20s, so I got married at 29.
You seem to be a guy that thinks ahead of the game when you do things. Like I get, like you said you waited. Like you there was experiences that you wanted to have. But anyway, take us through Afghanistan. The next two iterations.
So in Afghanistan, the next two times I went to Helmand Province, which is in the south. Helmand Province was originally held by a unit of the British Army, and we took an approach which we'd taken in Sierra Leone, where we'd take 120 people and we'd dump them in an area that we thought was strategically important for us. They were called district centers. And then we left them there. And what we didn't truly know about Afghanistan was that the part of Afghanistan we were in had been settled by certain tribes which had an incredible amount of combat experience from serving under certain commanders who were Caucasus, who'd overthrown the Soviet regime. So you got to think you're living in this town in Helmand Province in Afghanistan. Your dad and your granddad are from a certain tribe, and they were part of the Mujahideen brigade in that area that overthrew the Soviet Union. And then after they won the war,
superpower,
they cut a deal with the local tribes in that area and settled that. So we'd essentially found ourselves in an area where we were right next to Pakistan, where the Afghan Taliban had a pretty strong hold. You then had the Pakistani Taliban and the narcotics militias, but you also had the fact that every single extended family, everyone's uncle had combat experience and had
against
been fighting
Russia.
The Soviets.
Yeah. And they won, right? So there was that honor, right? And there was that, that heroic, unique identity. By the way, was Northern Alliance around at all?
At this point, the Northern Alliance had filtered out, and we had the Afghan army.
Got it.
My job was I was embedded in the Afghan army, and we were to train them and conduct reconnaissance and intelligence operations and bring them up to speed.
Now, did you create not ecosystem mergers, but did you create good relationships?
We created networks
with Afghanistan as well, or within those army units, or were they the enemy?
No, the Afghan army units, we would live with them. So there would be 8 of us, and then there would be 50 to 60 of them.
Did you have to look over your shoulder?
Yeah.
Was there certain people within that group that there was agendas? Okay.
Yeah.
What was that like?
The guy who replaced me was killed. In the back of a vehicle in a checkpoint. There was a lot of, we called them green on blue. And there was, the problem was bounties. So the problem was the Afghan army was recruited, the officer class was recruited from the Tajiks, which were like, have a pretty good position within Afghan society and have an Iranian, Persian background. And then the soldiers would be predominantly Pashto or predominantly Uzbek, would be paid very, very little. We're talking like $7 a day, originally about $3 a day, and would be recruited from villages where there was no work. So they weren't particularly well educated. They were very good people.
Yep.
And some of them, I would say, were some of the finest soldiers I'd ever met, 80% of them. But they were very poor and they didn't understand the situation they were in. Then you had foreign intelligence networks who would pay $10,000, $20,000 if one of them would shoot me.
Got it.
So that created a situation to sow distrust within the organization, kind of like within business, where you know, if people have nefarious kind of motivations, they sow mistrust between, undermine relationships.
Absolutely.
And a lot of money was flowing in to get them to attack us. And these young soldiers who may have families that need to go into surgery, may need to purchase their farms back, et cetera, wouldn't think too much of shooting us. So there was mistrust, but there was also an incredible amount of heroism, but there was also an incredible amount of drug abuse and other forms of abuses. So yeah, it was a very...
Was drugs really that rampant? Was it like heroin or was it...
it's heroin, hashish mostly. I'd take soldiers on patrol and they'd be smoking weed whilst on foot patrol. And then in the evenings, they would take harder drugs. And all the places that led them.
Did your experience, were you able to identify when you would get into a tricky situation? Did your instincts kick in? Did you ever kind of know when to like, wait, let me really kind of evaluate what's happening right now? Did anything come and surprise you as well?
Yeah, so there were two groups who were fighting in Helmand predominantly. It was the British Army and the Marine Corps. And that's kind of where the affinity with the US Marine Corps developed. And like, I know a bunch of Marines, and we'll talk about what FOB you're in Helmand, and you're probably down the road from each other, right?
Yeah.
You got a lot of kind of situational awareness. But there would be situations where you'd go to a checkpoint and your job was to take them out on patrol, take them to a local village, you know, train them up, see how their patrolling was, see how they would clear the IED belts, you know, what their drills would be like around vulnerable points and checkpoints. But then there would be times when you drive in there and everything would be fine. There'd be other times when you drive in there and they turn the machine guns around on all of the checkpoints and try to take you all hostage. And that happened several times. But the core issue was like how we approach feedback culturally. So in the US, in New York, feedback is offered prolifically, right?
Yes.
Particularly in the city and most businesses. In my day job, I work for Amazon, which is, we're very famous for our kind of very honest feedback, right? Yep. Culturally, to give someone feedback in Afghanistan is probably one of the worst things you could do.
Wow.
So we had to try and train them in a place where our feedback wouldn't injure their pride, and once you injured their pride,
it was over.
It was you were done.
Got it.
Wow. But you still had to train them to do a better job fighting.
Yeah.
And bring them up to Western standards. And ultimately, we failed, as we saw in the rout in the Afghan army in, you know, July, August 2021.
Just not judging, but the people of Afghanistan versus the people of Ukraine. I'm talking about the citizens now.
Yeah.
Was it the same? Was it similar, or was there a different feel?
It was different. It's different. If we use like a business analogy, like we look at leadership, right? There's plenty of companies that have turned themselves around under the right leadership. Like I watch CNBC in the mornings, right? People might be surprised, like think, oh, he's into international affairs, like he should be listening to NPR or whatever. I don't. I watch CNBC.
Yep.
Leadership, like, is a big deal. In Afghanistan, they didn't have leadership.
Got it.
And what they also had was other options.
Got it.
In Ukraine, they have leadership and they have no other options.
No other options. Yeah. So the boats are burnt, so they have no choice. Yeah. Thank you for that distinction, because that's important for folks to understand the difference. So, you know, you're in Afghanistan, you eventually leave and start your civilian life.
Yep.
And what did that look like for you?
I made a deal that if I survived the army, I'd quit smoking and I'd marry my girlfriend at the time. So I married her. I was 29. I actually quit smoking. I still have quit today.
Awesome.
Even though I made a sneaky deal that when I'm back in war zones, I can smoke, but I didn't. So you didn't see me smoking in Ukraine. So for the record,
I did not see him smoking in the Ukraine at all.
So I went into the business world. I initially went to Canada. My wife's Canadian, and I got a sales job selling advertising, which was important because in the military you learn a lot of things. You don't learn how to sell anything.
Yeah.
And you really, really need to learn how to sell if you're going to be successful. So
absolutely,
I had a sales job selling 100%. Advertising, which is good. And that was old school. That was under a couple of British guys who'd built a company, and that's like cold calling, ringing up clients, getting rebookings, right, all that good stuff. So that was useful. I cut my teeth there. I then came to the States because my wife got a job at a hospital here.
What does she do? Is she a nurse? A doctor?
She is an epileptologist. So she's a doctor that specializes in epilepsy.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah, she's a lot smarter than I am. And then I joined Team Rubicon, which is a disaster response organization around the US because I wanted to see a lot of the US.
And what year was this? Like, what are we talking about?
About 6 years ago.
Okay, so were you around, before we keep going, were you there when... not the Taliban, when ISIS started to make their run?
Yeah.
Or were you kind of out at that point?
I was kind of out. I was still tracking to it.
Got it.
I basically left the army when the decision was made not to intervene in Syria. Not because I held a strong opinion on it, but just because I didn't want to be sat in a barracks.
Understood.
In rural England.
Yep.
Then with Team Rubicon, I got to go, I think, over 30 states,
wow,
leading disaster response operations for like flooding.
And were you living here in New York at the time?
I was living in Ohio.
Okay, got it.
But like there would be an issue where, Hurricane Matthew would hit, South Carolina. We fly down there, get a bunch of trees off people's houses.
So for anyone listening, though, there was a desire for you to serve.
Yeah.
Humanity at all times. You always want to help a human.
There's also a desire to give back to America, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's kind of flowed through my life because I got to grow up in peace. Like most of my 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were war orphans. So, America's kind of impact in World War II was something that I'd always had in the back of my mind, right?
Understood.
So, yeah, I wanted to help out. I wanted to do some good. I went to grad school whilst I was with Team Rubicon. And then after that, after 2 years, I came across to New York and I worked in management consulting for government services, which is pretty cutthroat. So I kind of enjoyed that. I enjoyed that kind of environment. Like it's quite a tough environment. You got to do, offer better value propositions to then other companies in order to kind of, keep your headcount high, keep your people in jobs. But you've also got to be able to take inefficient government processes and fix them. And I kind of like that. I did that for 3 years. That was tough because like business is about efficiency, but in government, it's not. You have the political dynamic. So they're like, yes, we want you to achieve the same outcomes we would like in the private sector, but we don't want you to upset anyone.
Okay.
Like we don't want you to upset voters.
Got it.
So you can't send anyone a snooty letter, but you still need to get this amount of people to do this.
Got it.
Right.
And you had some success doing that.
Yeah, we had a lot of success there. We ended up working on a large government grants program, which was part of the Superstorm Sandy that had been handed out by Andrew Cuomo back in the day.
Yep.
And basically trying to close out that and account for where all the funding had gone and everything else. And everybody knows it was very politically controversial. But yeah, we had a lot of success there. We won a couple of contracts off a couple of very much larger firms that I was kind of into. And I was quite proud of that. And then I went across to Amazon because I wanted to.
Why did you leave? Why did you leave? Were you done with it, or did you looking for something more?
I worked on like a $4 billion program, and we'd done things at scale, but I wanted to do stuff at scale that nobody else had ever done it.
Got it.
So I went to Amazon. And
what year was this, Harv?
This is about 18 months ago.
Got it.
And at Amazon, I work on something called our high volume hiring program, where we hire hourly associates all across like North America, Middle East, North Africa, a couple other countries. And we hire significant amount, I can't give numbers, but we're hire like significant amounts of people every week at a scale that nobody else has ever managed to do via a centralized system. So
amazing.
Yeah, I like the idea of Amazon can invent things that can just be uncapped.
Got it.
They create mechanisms that will work for one, but they will also work for 10 million. And I don't think there's too many other organizations that can do that. And that's a huge skill that I wanted to learn. So I got I kind of got everything I kind of wanted at Amazon.
What is your title at Amazon?
I'm just manager at Amazon. I oversee a bunch of senior program managers. And
how many people do you actually oversee? If you're allowed to share. I don't know.
Not so many. I manage managers. We have about 7.
So if you manage managers, for people, what does that look like? How many meetings a day? Like, what is the course of that business look like for you?
It's a lot. It depends on the strength of your managers.
Yep.
Really, like it depends. When I was first building out the team, like I'm now over a year in, I have a fairly mature team. They're a good team.
Yep.
They're really great people. When we were first building out, like 6-7 hours a day in meetings, right? Going through what we need to do, what our milestones are going to look like, how we intertwine all the individual efforts into a big plan, and how we support like the business. Now it's not so hard, but yeah, it depends on the maturity of the organization, and that really, the maturity of the team, and that really comes down to the people that we hired.
Awesome. Anyway, thanks for checking in. And Harvey, one last time, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.